Welcome back to the Elevation Stage, where we've a top-class afternoon lined up for you. Seamus Hand, Managing Partner with KPMG, meets Danny McCoy, CEO of IBEC, to discuss the impact a year of changes has had on the business landscape and what we can draw on moving forward. But first, I'm excited to hear this very timely talk, Brexit, 6 months on and the impact to date. An interview where the Right Honourable Greg Hands MP, Minister of State for Trade Policy in the Department for International Trade UK, speaks with Thomas Byrne, Minister for European Affairs with the Department of Foreign Affairs Ireland. Enjoy the afternoon and I'll be back later.
Good afternoon and welcome everybody. My name is Daniel McConnell. I am the political editor at the Irish Examiner newspaper, and thank you very much for joining us today for our discussion on Brexit 6 months on, the impact so far. Make sure to join the conversation online on Twitter and Facebook at Business IRL, and be sure to use the hashtag Rebooting Ireland. We have an expert panel with us this afternoon to join us to discuss the impact of Brexit, not only here in Ireland, but across Britain and across Europe as well. Joined by Thomas Byrne, Minister for European Affairs in the Irish Government. He's been a TD since 2007 and was appointed by Taoiseach Micheál Martin to the position of European Affairs Minister last June. We're also joined by the Right Honourable Greg Hands MP, who is the Minister for State for Trade Policy at the Department of International Trade in the British Government. He's a former Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He has been a Conservative MP for the constituencies of Hammersmith and Fulham in 2005, the constituency of Chelsea and Fulham since 2010. I note as well that he voted Remain in the referendum, but has now obviously has to defend the decision to leave along with his government colleagues. So we'll get the conversation underway straight away. If I may start with you, Minister Hands, we were promised, and I suppose the British public were promised, to be delivered to the bright and the broad sunlit uplands post-Brexit. We've seen obviously, a large deficit in trade since the start of the year, falls in trade volumes, not only between Ireland and the UK, but between the UK and the EU. So I suppose my question is, have those broad lit uplands been delivered?
Well, thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me on. I think it's too early to tell. I think on the trade data that we've seen, the January data was very disappointing. The February data saw a significant uptick, particularly in UK exports to the EU. But look, I think in terms of the data, it's hard to extract out the COVID effect, let's be frank. Particularly some of the things like the rise in UK cases, and the Kent variant back in January caused significant disruption to trade flows with France at that time in particular. And obviously since then, we've seen varying impacts of COVID in different European countries. So I think it's a bit difficult to take the data. We need to see more consistent data. What I do think, though, is the UK's independent trade policy going forward from here. We've secured continuity with 66 different countries of trading arrangements, and we've already gone significantly further with our new trade deal with Japan. And I'm very optimistic about these new trade deals being able to deliver a real benefit to people right the way across the United Kingdom.
Let me just come in on that, because again, just quoting the latest statistics from your own statistics, your National Statistics Office, I mean, they said the record fall in January was only, I suppose, a partial rebound in February, not maybe quite the sort of the strong rebound that you spoke of, but it does, I suppose, highlight the difficulties faced by traders, business people, and individuals. I mean, I've been inundated with people from across Ireland in recent days and weeks who say, you know, items that they normally would have been able to source in the UK are no longer available to them. So this is causing real difficulties on a practical level on a daily basis. Would you not agree?
Well, there are certainly difficulties in the relationship, and there's difficulties in trade since the end of the transition period. I'm not denying that at all, but we're working through them. And actually the data, and I put a massive caution around the data, because comparing with a year ago, you know, you're comparing today's kind of COVID environment with the pre-COVID environment. But if you look at the latest data for that, just came out just last week for February, shows that UK exports to the EU February this year are 11.6 billion pounds compared to 13.2 billion pounds last year, which is down 10%. But how much of that is due to the pandemic and how much of that is due to post-Brexit trading situation is a little bit unclear. I think we should wait and see on the data. Let's wait and see for things to even out a little bit since then. And as we all recover from the pandemic, let's see what the position is. But we have put in very significant levels of support for traders post-Brexit, post the end of the transition period, in all kinds of areas. And we will continue to do so at the UK. And we're very, very keen to see a revival in our trade with the EU and our trade with Ireland coming back to some kind of sense of normality, at least, and building on that in the future.
Thomas Byrne, if I could bring you in here, I mean, our own Central Statistics Office data for January says, I mean, reported a 65% slump in imports from the UK in January alone. I mean, obviously, we don't have the February figures as of yet, but I mean, that's clearly a very alarming drop in the level of trade between ourselves and our nearest neighbour, is it not?
Oh, it is, and we're not surprised by that. Now, I will accept that COVID has probably something to do with it as well, but there's no doubt there's a Brexit effect, because what you see on the Irish Sea, the opposite is seen, in fact, on the direct routes to the continent, where trade has increased substantially. Route numbers have increased substantially as well. We have direct routes now in terms of roll on, roll off to Amsterdam, to Porto, various French ports, Belgium. So that has gone up. So that's definitely a Brexit effect. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And many companies had anticipated that, and that was starting to increase. Interestingly, trade between Northern Ireland and Scotland is, I think, pretty much similar to what it was last year. So that hasn't had a pandemic effect. It's still there, and I think shows the strength of them. That's a statistic that's not often quoted in all of the debates that we have around the protocol. Trade is still able to move relatively freely there. Look, barriers though have been raised. There's no two ways about that, and people and business look for ways to ease those barriers. And one way is from the Republic is to go direct to the continent. So that is certainly Brexit related.
And how would you characterise, I suppose, there's been a lot of noise since January 1st, that we've obviously had the issue on the 29th of January, the triggering of Article 16, etc. like that. I mean, not getting into the nitty-gritty of that particular incident, but I suppose that the wider relations between Dublin, Brussels and London clearly are under strain. I mean, Simon Coveney, our own foreign minister and former Taoiseach, said, you know, the Boris Johnson government essentially can't be trusted in terms of its dealings. I mean, where stand those relations from your perspective?
Well, from our perspective, I think even from Simon Coveney's and the Taoiseach's perspective, is that good relations with Britain, with Ireland, Britain with the European Union are really essential, not just desirable. We want them. We want to have good relations, and we're keen to engage with British ministers, as Simon Coveney has done, as I have done, as we're doing here today. It's essential for our economies. It's also essential for Northern Irish peace, but also the fact that a lot of our citizens move between the two islands freely, still, thankfully, in terms of freedom of movement. But many British people live here. A huge amount of Irish people live in Britain as well. So those ties that bind are there, and they're real, and they demand that we work very, very closely together in our economic and social interest.
Minister Hans, if I could bring you in here in relation to that relationship, not only with Dublin, but with Brussels and the wider EU. I mean, obviously, the Brexit process put those relations under significant strain. Where stand those relations from your perspective, and how important are those relationships now to the British government in a post-Brexit environment?
Well, extremely important, Daniel. I think I agree with every word that Thomas said in terms of the importance of the UK-EU relationship, but also the UK-Ireland relationship. I mean, is so important for both our countries for all kinds of reasons, both on the people front. My constituency of Chelsea and Fulham's got a significant Irish community in it, a very sort of traditional, long-standing community, as well as newer arrivals. And the reverse is also true today. So I think for all of those reasons, a very strong relationship. I think these are relationships that need work, actually, and work is being put in. You know, I met with Robert Troy, who Irish Trade Minister, a couple of months ago, quite soon after the end of the transition period, just to kind of re-establish that direct relationship on sort of trade issues. I'm delighted to be here with Thomas Byrne today. And I know that our ministerial teams are engaging very frequently. Boris Johnson, as our Prime Minister, also sort of personally involved in that, and making sure that we make this relationship work. You know, we are the EU and the UK. We are each other's largest, most important economic and political neighbours, and that is, I think, as true for the UK and Ireland. So we have to get on. We will get on, but you know, we've got to put a bit of extra time and effort into that relationship.
And in terms of managing that relationship, I mean, obviously there have been personality spats over the 5-year period since the referendum. I mean, how would you characterise, I suppose, the personality dynamics between, say, David Frost and his counterpart in the EU, Commissioner Mešković? I mean, how would you characterise that dynamic as things stand right now?
Mr. Šefčovič, I'm the only one in the UK government who could pronounce his name, because I've actually got a degree in Czech and Slovak, would you believe it?
And I've been practicing his pronunciation for about 4 hours today, so forgive me.
Oh, sorry. Look, David Frost has only recently taken on that specific role. Previously, that was Michael Gove relationship with Maroš Šefčovič. So, but look, I think the UK government, it's a really, really important relationship for us going forward. You know, we can't, looking back at what's happened the last now almost 5 years since the referendum, now is the time, the end of the transition period, now is the time to be looking forward. You know, where do we take the UK-EU relationship? It's not just on trade, it's on all kinds of other fronts as well. How do we build a strong relationship with our nearest partners? And by the same token, you know, the UK has become almost overnight the EU's largest trade partner, just behind the United States in terms of the size of the bilateral trade. So, the UK is also a really important partner for the EU overall. So we need to look forward rather than having more sort of Brexit wrangles, if you like, turning over the coals of the past, and looking forward to how we can build that relationship, work together. I can tell you in areas of international trade, the UK and the EU are very aligned on things like how the international trading system should work, fighting against export controls in relation to COVID-related produce, working together with the World Trade Organization, all of these things. I think there's a massive sense of shared purpose there that we need to build on and look forward.
Thomas Byrne, again, in relation to moving forward and looking at the future relationship, I mean, there's still, I think it'd be fair to say there are many issues that are yet to be finalised between the EU, Ireland as part of that, and the United Kingdom. I mean, how confident are you that, from an Irish business perspective, and I say a Northern Ireland perspective as well, that those issues can be resolved and done amicably, not to the detriment, I suppose, to Irish business or Irish farmers particularly?
Well, look, Brexit was to the detriment of business and farmers. There's no two ways about that, and we could do nothing about that. That was a decision the British people took. So what we wanted to achieve was a trade and cooperation agreement as best we could. So as best our negotiators could, they have, improved the situation to some degree. But Brexit is the problem. What we need to make sure now is that in the working out of the trade agreement and the withdrawal agreement, that as much flexibility is applied as is possible and as is consistent with the objectives of the single market, to ensure that it works for everybody. So it works for us, and it works for Northern Ireland as well. I mean, many of the issues that we see in Northern Ireland, I mean, the exact same rules apply to us, and we're not getting extensions. So what's happening is in the Republic of Ireland, is that companies have adjusted and are adjusting with some difficulty. And in Northern Ireland as well, I mean, notwithstanding all of the difficulties that we've complained about and are well aired, British government is committed and has publicly stated its commitment to the implementation of the protocol. So business knows that ultimately the protocol is there and there to stay and will have to be complied with. And whatever extensions or whatever improvements are done in the interest of ultimately implementing that protocol and making sure it's consistent with the single market, and also ensuring, I think what we have to do as a result of that, is that I would be strongly encouraging Greg Hands and the British government, as I've done in private conversations as well, to try to encourage some businesses from Britain who see an advantage to be placed in a single market, maybe to consider Northern Ireland, because if they need to have a single market base, why not look at Northern Ireland? And I think that would go a long way to alleviating some of the concerns at the ground about a lack of, a separation from Britain or whatever. If British household names were to decide to set up a distribution centre or whatever it was, I think that would be enormously helpful.
Greg Hans, in relation to that, I mean, one of the big stories in recent days has been the position of a company like JD Sports, a very well-known sports company, who's had to now set up a warehouse in Brussels or in Belgium, and there's possibility of establishing one in Dublin to overcome the Brexit dilemma. But this process has just caused huge difficulties for businesses seeking to try and operate normally. And I'm just wondering, from a British government perspective, is that sense realised that this process has caused huge uncertainty, huge difficulties, and I suppose be done to aid those businesses to ensure those barriers don't continue or crop up to the detriment of those businesses?
Well, look, as I said earlier, there are definitely frictions there in place. Some of the frictions are inevitable consequences of leaving the customs union and the single market. Some of those frictions, I think, can be worked around with a pragmatic approach. In terms of how the different agreements are interpreted, there's various cases we found where you get quite variable treatments from different EU member states, particularly in relation to customs, sometimes in relation to VAT. I think a sort of a more consistent approach across the EU would make things easier for our exporters and our traders. I think Thomas's comments about encouraging more businesses into Northern Ireland, we're absolutely in that space. The importance of the economy in Northern Ireland, the importance of making sure that investment continues to come into Northern Ireland. I mean, that is really going to be the future of Northern Ireland, is through inward investment, being able to export better to, let's be frank, to both Great Britain, to Ireland, and to the European Union for its key areas, agriculture, agri-food, financial services, fintech. There's a lot going on in Northern Ireland that we would want to continue to encourage. So I would say I think we should take a pragmatic approach. Yes, we will be enforcing the protocol, but let's be pragmatic about it. Let's think about what works and what will help ease matters and what will help ease the situation in Northern Ireland. That, I think, should be our primary focus, not forgetting, of course, that the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement was all about making sure that all communities in Northern Ireland felt that they had a good future and part of that future. So we need to be as recognizing the importance of East-West trade as we are of North-South trade. But Thomas's point about Northern Ireland, also having opportunities, potentially unique opportunities, I think is a very, very good one. And we can find ways to bring people into Northern Ireland, take advantage of the talents of the people of Northern Ireland, and making sure that people in Northern Ireland can profit from new arrangements. I think that's going to be really important for us.
And speaking very frankly, there's been a lot of noise politically in recent days, months around this issue of creating the border in the IRC, particularly amongst the unionist community. I wonder, from a British government perspective, is that an issue that's closed, that there will be no revisiting of that issue? Because again, that seems to be the consistent call from northern politicians and elsewhere. And I suppose, given the fact that the British government's position has changed on that in the past, can you, I suppose, guarantee that position won't again?
Well, look, I'm not the minister in charge of that aspect of trade. But what I would say is, I think it needs everybody to be pragmatic here. And think about, as I say, what works. If the previous process of Tesco shipping sausages to Great Britain to Northern Ireland with really no real risk of those sausages entering the Irish market or the EU more generally, then I think we should take a pragmatic approach. I mean, the UK government is all about let's do whilst recognising the protocol. Let's do what works, and let's do what works for the people of Northern Ireland, for those key supply chains and key flows of goods. I think that is the most important thing, is making sure that the people of Northern Ireland can have a rosy future with the goods being delivered to them that they've become used to over many decades now.
And Thomas Byrne, I mean, obviously the incident in January, you know, there was a threat of importing or putting a ban on imports into the Northern Ireland. Was that a harbinger for future actions by the EU should relations with the UK sour again, or do you think that that was just a mistake? Because again, that would have significant implications not only for businesses but obviously for the relations between all three parties, Dublin, and the EU.
No, I've spoken personally to quite a number of EU commissioners on this exact point, and there's no doubt in the world, but this was simply a mistake, and it's a mistake that will not be repeated, I think, at all costs. It simply was that, and I think, to be fair to them, was rectified within a few hours. I mean, look, I think undoubtedly there have been some issues with the protocol. That's undoubted, but we did see photographs of empty shelves in January. We're not seeing that now. You know, some supermarkets in Northern Ireland have publicly stated that this is not affecting them in the slightest. Other, like Tesco, for example, I've got friends of mine in the north give photographs. I mean, a huge amount of the prepared processed meats on their shelves are Northern Ireland or Republic of Ireland origin. And this wasn't an issue for them. There may well be some products, I've no doubt, but it's a very, very small amount of products that will be coming from Britain. I mean, Northern Ireland is a famous producer of sausages and rashers, for example. And I'm quite sure there's probably more going across to Britain, and certainly more coming into us as well from Northern Ireland. So some of the issues, I feel, are not what they were possibly in January. Like we heard the stories about Percy Pig sweets. I mean, they're freely available in the relevant shop in Dublin. There's no doubt about that. I've checked for my kids. But I think we really just have to show, as a European Union, and this doesn't apply, we do anyway, but the European Union as a whole has to show an interest in Northern Ireland, has shown understanding. I've got some of my colleagues on the European Council. We started this already, engaging with communities, and the Council of Ministers are engaging communities in Northern Ireland to hear for themselves what the issues are, to understand the situation better. The understanding is very strong of the North, probably the East, not as strong in the European Union as maybe it should be or it could be, but then maybe how would they know they're not directly involved in the situation? So I started that process. MEPs have done the same. I think that'll be really, really useful.
Greg Hans, I mean, has Britain noticed the cost of not being present in Europe so far yet? Again, as you said earlier, is it too early to tell? I mean, has there been a noticeable cost from a British perspective at not being at the table in Brussels when key decisions are being made?
Well, look, I mean, that's an inevitable consequence of no longer being in the European Union. You know, there's no point in sort of lamenting we're out, but we'd love to still be at the table. I mean, that's just not in any stretch of the imagination, that is not a realistic proposition. I mean, I've always viewed Brexit as a set of challenges and a set of opportunities. I'm very much involved with the opportunities in terms of our independent trade policy, particularly with the rest of the world.
Talk to me about that international trade policy, because again, one of the great boasts about pre Brexit Britain was trade deals with the US, trade deals with China and everyone else. I mean, where stands that particular issue from your perspective?
Well, we're in a good place. We've done 5 rounds of negotiation with the United States. We have done, I think, 4, maybe 5 rounds with Australia. Just started another round with New Zealand last week. We've applied to join the CPTPP free trade area, which is covers about 13% of world GDP. So we're doing a lot on that space, as well as having rolled over EU trade agreements with 66 countries, gone further with Japan. So there is a huge amount of work going on in that space. But equally, we have to preserve and build on our trade with the European Union, which about 45% of UK trade, depending on which year you take and so on. I mean, it's a massive amount of UK trade. And actually, the position we've got ourselves in, we've negotiated two deals, the withdrawal agreement and then the trade and cooperation agreement. Yes, there are some frictions there. Yes, some of those frictions are inevitable from leaving the customs union, the single market. Yes, we can work around some of the other frictions, though. You know, we could be pragmatic about some of these things. We can find workarounds, find solutions that will work for traders to improve the flow that needn't be to the detriment of anybody, but instead to the benefit of our businesses and consumers, going both ways. So that is where I see all of those opportunities, is having a good relationship and working together on you know, the 90% plus of issues where we're totally in common, we're totally aligned on many of the global trading issues, WTO reform, these areas, making sure that the world remains a pro-free trade, the free movement of goods, and making sure there's no protectionist barriers. You know, that is something that I think the UK and Ireland in particular.
I'm just conscious, Gregory, has the clock is against us, so forgive me for cutting you off there. Thomas Byrne, just in conclusion, of the challenges that you have addressed, when do you think that Ireland will be, I suppose, in a position that they're no longer significant or you know, material? When do you think that those issues that relating or kind of emanating out of that Brexit decision will be fully concluded?
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean, look, Britain is always going to be a big trading partner with Ireland. We share a language, we're very close, share citizens each side. So the difficulties that Brexit has caused will be with us. I mean, those customs checks will be there now for forever. So that is an extra cost to business that's just going to be added on, and that's a difficulty for us. And while we will try to improve that through the Brexit Adjustment Reserve funding, you know, there has been harm done obviously to fishing, some to agriculture as well. But just general trade will, I think, inevitably be reduced in the longer term.
Okay. And Greg Hans, finally, I asked you about the broad sunlit uplands at the restart. When do you think you will arrive in that nirvana that has been so widely described by Boris Johnson?
Well, look, I think we've got to get through the pandemic. That is obviously a massive issue alongside all of this. And fortunately, the UK vaccination rollout has been a huge success so far. We're not out of the woods there, and I think that will put us in a good position to really move forward on various trade deals as well. Look, I think where we are with those trade partners that I mentioned earlier, where we are with the rollover agreements we got from the previous EU trade deals, I think the UK is in a good position overall to prosper in the future, but we have to work together and continue our excellent relations with the EU and with Ireland.
Very good. Well, we will have to leave it there. Unfortunately, time is against us. But I want to thank both Minister Thomas Byrne and Minister Greg Hans for their contribution and their discussion today. A very enlightening conversation. I want to thank everybody for watching this discussion as well. And also encourage everybody to make sure they air their views on the social media platforms as outlined at the very start. But listen, for everybody, for the moment, thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye for now.